Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. All together. Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namo. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Shri Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadara Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Prabhu Nityananda Hare Kṛṣṇa Hare Kṛṣṇa 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Kṛṣṇa Hare Kṛṣṇa 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Calling out. There we go. Hare Kṛṣṇa Hare Kṛṣṇa 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gaur Premanandi. Yeah, this. Great, thank you. Hare Krishna. My name, as Swamiji correctly pronounced it earlier this morning, Garuda Das. And it's been a long time since I've been here, so I'm very happy to be here. I'd like to thank Ramapad Swami for inviting me here to present a few items. And I'd like to thank the organizers also for putting together such a nice program. One thing that I was introduced to by one of the organizers was the search for a parking spot. Shyamasaki said that there would be a parking spot available to me. And last night when I came to the temple to listen to Swamiji's talk, I was driving around, all around, looking for my parking spot. And then I said, okay, I know what Shyamasaki doing. She's teaching me to search for Kṛṣṇa, not for a parking spot. But there it is, almost looking like a grave. So there are many ways to interpret this, and I just wanted to share it with you and to thank Shyamasaki for her lesson, which I obviously needed terribly. So the way I translate a little bit extravagantly, the Om Jnana Timirandasya, the universe embraces each one of us, yet we can be so blinded by darkness. Because our true teachers guide us with the light of pure knowledge, our eyes can be opened to the power and sweetness of illumination. Therefore, let us bow down before those who guide us on our spiritual path. So today, what I'd like to do is have you sort of be a little acquainted with my relationship with this Vraja Līlā, with this greatest of all Līlas. As Vishwanatha Chakravarti states, it is the Sarva Līlā Chudamani, the crown jewel of all Līlas, the Rāsa Līlā, what's known also as the Rāsa Krida, or Rāsa Panchadhyayi, the 5 chapters on the Rāsa. Let me make another little Sanskrit lesson here. There's a difference between Rasa and Rāsa. Okay, can everyone hear that difference? Okay, when we speak of Rasa, that's the generic term for our various relationships with divinity. Rasa is the specific dance that is the Vraja Gopikas have with Kṛṣṇa. Now, Vishwanatha Chakravarti defines Rasa, which is the name of this dance, but it conveniently has a strengthened vowel, the first A, which then he interprets as the sum total of all rasas. So in many ways, the Rasa Līlā is the sum total of all rasas. So I thought I'd take you through my relationship with the Rasa Līlā. Back in 1974, I had the good fortune of going to Mayapur, the first big festival, and I went on morning walks with Prabhupada and heard Prabhupada morning and evening. And from those talks, I realized I had a special relationship with the scriptures. I didn't know what it was going to be. It was too early in my devotional life. After all, I had just joined the ashram in 72. Prior to that, I was a serious practitioner of yoga, meditational yoga, for 5 years. I came as a vegetarian already for 5 years. But there I was, very humble in the back row. At least I'm suggesting that I was humble. And of course, I know all of these front runners here. Of course, Satsvarup Maharaj is in the back there. And then there's Brahmananda, Bhavananda, Rupanuga, Hansaduta, Atreya Rishi, and Nitai. I don't remember his name, but anyway, there's little Garuda Das, okay? And a little bit more of a, here I am, looking like a spiffy young man, shaven. So years later, it came to be obvious to me that Prabhupada desired to have certain devotees to forge ahead in the academic arena and establish Vaishnava studies as a field of knowledge. This was at the time that the Bhaktivedanta Institute was being formed. And this was mainly formed by devotees, about 4 or 5 devotees, who almost had their doctorates in a scientific field or already had their doctorates in the scientific field. Swarup Damodar was just finishing up his doctorate at University of California, Irvine. Ravindra Swarup is more on the philosophy side. He was just finishing up his doctorate. That's when Bhubrit Ji in the back there, he and I knew each other back in 1975. And he came up to me today and said, "Do you remember me?" And I'm thinking in my mind, how the hell am I to remember you? But of course, as soon as he said his name, I immediately saw Bhubrit in the face. I saw it. But back then, Ravindra was finishing his doctorate. You remember that, right? And I was taking care of the whole temple while Prabhupada came that summer for Rath Yatra and so on. So it was in my association with Swarup Damodar and Rupanuga Prabhu that it became apparent that I should take up the academic sort of mantle of becoming an authority on us. Prabhupada appreciated so much scholars, outside scholars' statements on endorsing his books. And he said he wanted some devotees to be the heads of the departments of religion one day. Well, of course, heads of departments in America means a lot of paperwork. But what Prabhupada meant was something really more appropriate to English universities, which was leading scholars, scholars making a difference, scholars influencing the knowledge on Vaishnava studies. And back in as early as 1969, Prabhupada wrote to a devotee that if they can prove through comparative study that Krishna consciousness provides the most sophisticated and the highest theology that there is, this will be a great accomplishment. So that was kind of my goal. And so I experimented and decided to apply to the best institutions at the time. And that was the University of Chicago, where Edward Dimmock was, who wrote the foreword to Prabhupada's original Macmillan Bhagavad Gita, and to University of Pennsylvania, sort of down the street from here. So back then I was a little insecure doing this. So the first thing I wrote in my statement of purpose applying to doctoral programs was, I am a devotee of the Hare Krishna movement. This is not the way you apply to graduate school. But that's the way I applied to graduate school. And to make matters worse, I said, and if you accept me to your program, I intend to pursue studies right along these lines. And I figured if they didn't like that, then I don't like them. It's that simple, okay? Thank you for your applause, but it's not necessary. Anyway, the point is, I ended up going to University of Chicago in the doctoral program. At the time, I was so naive about academic studies, I had no idea how luxurious it was to go from a BA right into a doctoral program. I did not know that, but I was accepted right into a doctoral program. And just a half a year into that program, Rupanuga calls me up and says, Garuda, I don't think anyone's going to do this, so you need to go to Harvard. I said, Rupanuga, I just got here. This is a great program. Edward Dimmock's here, Hans von Beuten, and so many scholars who are experts in the Vaishnava literature. I said, this is where I need to be. He said, no one's going to do this, so you need to go to Harvard because no one knows what the University of Chicago is. So I got very annoyed and I applied. And of course I got in. So that is where I ended up getting my doctorate. And on that summer, Prabhupada's last summer here, during that last summer, Satsvarup Maharaj had read my master's thesis, which was on the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Satsvarup said to me, please send this to Prabhupada. He would really enjoy reading this. I said, absolutely not. Prabhupada is not well. This is going to take him away from translating the Bhagavatam. I said, I completely refuse. He said, Garuda, I'm telling you to send this to Prabhupada. And I said, well, who are you to tell me to send this to Prabhupada? I don't want to send this to Prabhupada. Now, Satsvarup Maharaj and I were very close back then, and we used to send each other letters. I don't know if you know what letters are like, but they're a form of communication that goes through Donkey Express. So I used to be very attached to getting letters from Satsvarup Maharaj because they were rather colorful, and he would draw pictures on them, and pictures of an eagle, taking snakes in his talons, and he would label the snakes different professor names. And so I really was very attached to those letters. They're very colorful and very expressive. So Satsvarup then said to me, he said, if you don't send this to Prabhupada, I will never write to you again. I said, wow. But I got indignant. I said, fine. Don't write to me. Well, after a month, I was actually missing his letters. So I said, darn it. Okay, so I'm going to send it. So I sent it to India, the master's thesis on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and with a letter to Prabhupada explaining that I was on my way to Harvard University and that I was going to establish, as best I could, a better understanding of our Chaitanya Vaishnava tradition. Meanwhile, Rupanuga also, in his last letter to Prabhupada, which was his 101st letter to Prabhupada, the very last letter he wrote to Prabhupada, in the last paragraph, Rupanuga is describing my activities up at Harvard. So who happens to be Prabhupada's secretary at the time the thesis arrives? Satsvarup. Now, they changed pretty often, but Satsvarup happened to be there, and Satsvarup wrote back to me, said that Prabhupada read through your thesis, and he said, I am pleased. He said, tell him I am pleased he is preaching on such a high level. So that gave me the full push to go through the austerities of getting not one merely, not two, but 3 master's degrees and a doctorate at Harvard. Applause is not necessary. I really don't want applause for that. Other things maybe, this no. It was hell going through all that. You don't applaud someone who's going to hell. Okay, so it was really a lot of tapas, really a lot of tapas. So Anyway, this is what, now when you apply to a doctoral program, you have to state, so ultimately, I got this master's degree. One of them was a mistake. It was, that's another story that I can't go into. We don't have time. But one of the things you do when you apply for a doctoral program is you already have a pretty good idea of what your focus is going to be. And my degree is, it says religionum comparationem. Harvard doesn't know how to write in English. They still write in Latin. So my thesis focus was going to be this, a comparative thesis, comparing the Bhakti theology with the Catholic theology of St. John of the Cross, because his was so resonantly familiar with Bhakti theology. And I thought by putting them together in dialogue that this would establish something really, really important. And I still feel that way. But my professor, my mentor, my doctoral mentor, said to me, look, I'm confident. So for years, all my peers at Harvard and my mentor knew that that's what I was going to write on. But when I finally sat in front of him in his office, he behind his desk and I in front, he said, I know there's plenty of theological work done on John of the Cross. I'm not confident that there's a lot of work on the Chaitanya side. So I think it would be imbalanced for you to do a comparison at this point, unless you can show me that there really is enough on the Vaishnava side. So I said, well, perhaps I can show you. And then suddenly, Professor Carmen stops me and asks, tell me, what is the highest, the very highest, the pinnacle of your theology? What is the highest theological vision? So I'm sitting there and I'm like flipping through, the Gita in my mind. I'm going through the whole Bhagavatam, I'm going through the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita. I'm going back to the Bhagavatam, going back and forth in my head. And he said, take your time. And I was taking my time. And I finally said, I remembered, how, how the Rāsa Panchadhyayi was recited to Mahaprabhu, and how this was so pleasing to him. And I remember reading different things and so on. So I basically said, well, it would have to be the Rāsa Līlā. That would have to be the highest vision. He said, so as Christians worship the cross, as Jews worship the Ark of the Covenant, as the Muslims worship Mecca, the Chaitanya Vaishnava tradition worships the Rāsa Līlā, the Rāsa Mandala. That's what I told him. I said, okay. So has there been work done on that? I said, oh, well, everyone knows that this is the case, so I'm sure. He said, show me. So I scoured the Harvard libraries. There are 12. Largest library system in the world of any university. And I came back with nothing. And he said, that is your dissertation. I said, but professor, it's not comparative. My degree is in comparative religion. He said, you will study it and bring it into dialogue, make it ready, dialogue ready. And that will be how it's comparative. So I'm thinking, now you need to understand the setting. This was back in the early, let's say late 80s, early 90s. Back then in ISKCON, there were wonderful devotees who were very well versed in the Bhagavata and the philosophy, giving classes. And many of them, when they did, and they talked about the Vraja Līlas, they said, you read, of course, the Vraja Līlas, read Kṛṣṇa book and read, what's in the Bhagavata, but don't read the Rāsa Līlā, you're not qualified. So there were actually leading devotees saying this in the 90s. Don't read the Rāsa Līlā, you're not advanced enough. So here I was, ready to call my godbrothers and say, guess what I'm writing on? And I just didn't know where to start. I started with Satsrup and see what he would say. I said, what do you think? I mean, should I try to get out of it? He said, no, Garuda, your doctoral mentor says to write about, if he told you to write about Mickey Mouse, you write about that. You know, your doctoral degree is totally dependent on your mentor at that point of education. Any of you who have doctorates know that. So I didn't like what he said, so I called Rupanuga. I saw, Rupanuga, you wouldn't believe this, but my mentor is making me write about the Rāsa Līlā. How do I get out of this? He said the same thing Satsrup said. So I think I tried a few other godbrothers. I didn't know Ramapad Swami at the time, but I would have called him. He probably would have said the same thing. I'm being presumptuous, but we can talk later. So I had to figure out, how am I going to do this? So I, thought about, where does the Rāsa Līlā fit into all of these literature? And this is a simple chart. Of course, the right side is the Shaiva and Shakta text, the Vaishnava text on the left side. And the Bhagavata is right here. And the Chaitanya Charitamrita doesn't even figure into this exoteric set of literature. But it does here. And this is a diagram that I have in my book. And it shows how the exoteric literature is, very much the Vedas, the Darshanas, the Upavedas, so on and so forth, okay? But then you go into the second row of petals, lotus petals. You've got the 18 Puranas, you've got the Ramayana, you've got the Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, and so on. But then you've got the Bhagavata. The Bhagavata is held up in such high esteem. It functions for the Chaitanya tradition as a kind of Shruti, even though technically it's Smriti. Shruti means what is heard, or typically refers to the Vedas, and Smriti means remembered. I like to in his commentary on the Shruti, I like to translate these a little differently. Shruti is revelation, and Smriti is realization. So I think that's a good way to understand it. Okay? So then you've got the Bhagavata right here, books 1 through 9 and 11 through 12. And then the 10th book, the largest of 90 chapters, is still even further toward the middle. And even in the middle of the middle are the Vraja Līlas. And then of all the Vraja Līlas, it's the Rasa dance, the Rāsa Līlā. And from those exoteric literatures come the esoteric literatures. So when you hear Swamiji moving from the Bhagavata to some of the visions of the Acharyas, he's jerking you around from the exoteric to the esoteric and then back to the exoteric. So if you feel a little jerked around by his wonderful presentations, that's what he's doing. He's moving you from the Bhagavata to the very special visions of the Acharyas. And rightfully, and I agree with Swamiji when he says that Vishwanath Chakravarti is just, he's just a genius with this. And I will show you some instances of this later on. So here's where the Chaitanya Charitamrita exists, in this esoteric area. So what happens is that the exoteric Līlā moves you into the very center of the Rasa Panchadhyayi, and it's through, so the Rasa Panchadhyayi is the very pinnacle of exoteric literature, while it's the gateway to all esoteric literature. And that's what this chart is to show. So there we go, the Rasa Panchadhyayi. And of course, all of this takes place in the earthly, transcendental Vraj, where all of you know. And the pilgrimage dramas, the performances of all these Leelas in Vrindavan begin with the Rasa dance and end with the Rasa dance. Again, showing and demonstrating the importance of how the Ras Līlā is the Līlā that embraces all Līlas. There are the young boys dressed up as Rajagopikas, doing a pretty good job. I mean, I think they don a sari pretty well. I've never tried it, but they do a good job of it. So, and then Shukadev Goswami, who narrates the whole Bhagavad to Maharaj Parikshit, demonstrates before and after the Rasa Panchadhyayi chapters ways of indicating that this is the greatest of all Līlas. A scholar once challenged me, well, I know the Chaitanya school says it's the greatest of all Līlas, but does the Bhagavata itself indicate that it is the greatest of all Līlas? And I've determined, in my dissertation for Harvard, I showed that indeed it does. With careful exegetical analysis, it does. So this is a painting I had commissioned. You can't see it very well here, but you can see it a little bit. In the traditional Rajasthani style, I engaged a Rajasthani artist, Bhaktin, who took 5 months in Jaipur with her teachers to execute this painting. I worked with her on the composition to make sure that it was exacting of the text itself. But one thing is a major departure from the text. And I'm not going to tell you what that is until later. So this is what I produced with the artist when I came out as a book. Now I want to share with you, what is a talk without sharing what Prabhupada said? Well, you will be amazed at all the things that Prabhupada said about the Ras Līlā. Unless you put it all together, you wouldn't know that Prabhupada said these things. But that is the ultimate goal, to understand Krishna's Līlā. I mean, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? What about this? By gradual development of transcendental knowledge, one can rise to the stage of the transcendental arts of music and dance displayed by the Lord in his Ras Līlā. So similarly, instead of trying to satisfy our senses independently, if we join with Kṛṣṇa in his Rasa dance, as cowherd boys, gopis, we join with Kṛṣṇa, then you get the same pleasure as Kṛṣṇa. So if you're ever wondering what to do with eternity, if you attain eternal life, basically you're going to be dancing the rest of your eternal life. So we need dance lessons. That's Kṛṣṇa Bhakti Sadhana. Those are your dance lessons. So this is the greatest benediction to the human society, to train them to go back to Kṛṣṇa and dance there with Kṛṣṇa in his Ras Līlā. It's pretty straightforward. I think we need to get ready. In the Rasa dance, Kṛṣṇa performed the Rasa dance, not exactly the ball dance. I think he means the ballroom dance, but in an imitation of that Rasa dance. But it is an imitation of the Rasa dance. Just join with Kṛṣṇa, his Rasa dance, his play with cowherd boys, his dealing with his father and mother in Vrindavan. So this movement is to join Kṛṣṇa's pastimes. Therefore, the intelligence is that we should go back to home, go back to Kṛṣṇa and dance with him in his Rasa dance. Participation with the Lord in his eternal Ras Līlā is the highest living condition, perfect in spiritual bliss and eternal knowledge. I think I already read that one. Okay, it's a repeat. Okay. This is called the Rasa dance. You have heard about Kṛṣṇa's Rasa dance? That is happiness. I believe Prabhupada said this to John Lennon and George Harrison. That dance is called the Līlā dance, and it is the most elevated of all Vrindavan pastimes. So there you have it. Our Krishna conscious movement is not a religious movement. It is a movement for purifying the heart. To me, this is a most powerful statement. It's something that transcends the sectarianism that's out there, that even at times we can project, but really, it is a process of purifying the heart. That is what we're all about. So all of us have heard about that Upanishadic passage, right? The bird in the tree, right? Well, I happen to be right there with the bird in the tree. So I took a picture. Well, okay, maybe I'm using someone else's, but whatever. Two birds I translated from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Two birds united as companions cling to the same tree. Of these two, the one eats the bittersweet berry, the pipala fruit, while the other looks on without eating. Look at that. Look how this guy's, look at that. Look at that huge berry right there. It's something else. On the same tree, a person, Purusha, immersed in the sorrows of this world, is deluded and grieves on account of helplessness. That's the state of humanity. That's the conditioned state in which so many humans find themselves. Distracted by the bittersweet fruit of this world and ignoring our eternal companion. When this person sees the other, the divine reality in all its greatness, one becomes freed from sorrow. So, given what we've just read, I have summarized our bhakti theology in 4 simple statements, which can be elaborated on by many books. And so this is coming out in a book that's going to be released in August, and I'll show you that in a minute. First, the worldly conditioning of the heart. So we've seen this in the bird eating the pipala fruit in the tree. The second, an awakening and opening of the heart. There are many ways that human beings can sort of have this awakening of the heart, opening of the heart in this world, but not fully enough. And the Krishna Bhakti process is about awakening it in a full way, allowing for steps 2, 3, and 4. The purification and deepening of the heart. And finally, the free flowing and overflowing of the heart. So the steps to achieve prema, as we know from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu or the Nectar of Devotion, are these. And I won't go through these too long because we've got a lot to cover. I have till when? 1:45, right? Anyone in charge here? Good, no one's in charge. I like it best that way. That way I can kind of feel like I am, sort of. Yeah. What's that? 12:30? But we started at quarter of. Don't I get my 2 hours? The Swami says 2 hours. You want to deal with him or you want to deal with me? Okay. Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. The steps to achieve levels within prema. Okay, so, wait a minute. Oh, this is the wrong. I'm giving you the wrong. Okay, anyway, this is a mistake. I'm giving you the same list as I give you for the first one. There are steps to achieve prema, which is this chart. But then the next one is when one is achieving, pranava and so on, steps that go deep into prema. I will correct this for later. But here, I'm talking about it here. The worldly conditioning of the heart. In this phenomenal world, souls are blinded to their true spiritual nature. Whether it be in affluent or poor societies, all humans suffer from an impoverishment of the heart. Although every human is endowed with faith, shraddha, the heart's capacity to love is very limited because it is invested in things and in persons disconnected from the divine. It is due to the disease of the heart, hridrogam, that one lives a life of selfishness, centered upon false identity of self and a false vision of reality. So, hridrogam, the very last verse of the 173 verses of the Rāsa Līlā, speaks about how one can overcome the hridrogam by reading this Līlā, the disease of the heart. An awakening and opening of the heart, the soul's movement from the first stage, the worldly conditioning of the heart, to the second stage, an awakening and opening of the heart, can be understood as by the tradition's term sambandha, or the coming together into a relationship with the divine. At this stage, a soul has placed the heart on the divine. Machitta magata prana, right? Shraddha. The soul has come together with persons whose hearts have been purified and absorbed in divine love, sadhu sangha, and is now engaged in a sacred life of loving actions and connected to a holy lineage, bhajana kriya. The purification and deepening of the heart, the movement from the second stage to the third, can be identified by the tradition's term of abhideya, or the application of practices. At this stage of greater and greater levels of the heart's purification, such a soul discovers that all the meaningless things in life are now ineffectual, anartha, nivritti. One becomes very established in the practice of bhakti yoga, nishtha. One acquires a natural taste for bhakti practices, ruchi, and one eventually develops intense attachment to such practices, asakti, to the point that one's heart is filled with affection for the divine, bhava, the penultimate phase prior to achieving prema itself. And finally, the movement from the third stage to the fourth stage can be identified by the tradition's term prayojana, or the attainment of perfection. That is, the attainment of purest love or prema. After reached, prema also has 7 stages of greater intensity. A tenderness, okay, this is the part where you go deeper. Once attaining prema, so first there are 8 stages of attaining prema. That's numbers 1 through 3. And in 4, one goes through the 8 stages of deepening into prema itself, a more intensification of prema itself. And here I'm describing it, which is a tenderness in pure love, sneha, honor or pride in pure love, mana, affection in pure love, pranaya, feelings of passion in pure love, raga, a further intensification of passionate feelings in pure love, anuraga, a heart overflowing with uncontainable feelings of love, bhava, and finally, such uncontainable feelings as they connect with the supremely overflowing love coming directly from the heart of the divine, mahabhava, a loving energy that especially spills over into the hearts of those who have achieved the highest realms of prema, and also a loving energy that embraces all worlds and all beings. Now, the reason we chant the Panchatattva mantra before chanting the Maha Mantra is because we have this special dispensation. None of us will attain Mahabhava. that is uniquely for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Radha. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is like this geyser of uncontainable, sort of spray, like a geyser of prema. And while we don't attain Mahabhava, we get to bathe in the spray of that Mahabhava. And that's our tradition. That's why we chant the Panchatattva mantra. So we have a very special access to the very, very highest level of divine love. And that's what our tradition is all about, is divine love. It's about a purification of the heart, Prabhupada says. So finally, my dissertation got published as Dance of Divine Love and published by Princeton University Press. And there it is. It was published in 2005. After my dissertation was written, in graduate school, they tell you you cannot write more than 300 words. 300 pages. 300 words would be about pretty much my style at the time, but 300 pages. And I'm thinking, I've never written 300 pages in my life. How am I going to write 300 pages now? Something to satisfy Harvard professors. So, I was thinking, well, you can piece together 9 graduate papers. I'm thinking of it that way, quantitatively, and so on. Well, as it turns out, I ended up I was finding so much material, I had to petition the Committee on Higher Degrees to go 100 pages over the 300 pages. By the time I finished, I went 100 pages over the allowance of 450 to 550. When I went in for my defense, I was not nervous at all about the content. No one knew more about the Rāsa Panchadhyayi than me in the world. So no problem. In the academic world, hands down, I was the one. Okay? But I was nervous about the page count because they could have kicked me out. So I accidentally, on purpose, forgot to number the pages after 400. And they didn't notice. And that's why I'm sitting here today instead of in some kind of academic jail of some sort. Then 20 years later, namely this year, and within a month or two, the book will come out with Oxford University Press in a much, not 450 pages. Oh, by the way, that 550-page dissertation turned out to be later, as I kept researching, 2,800 pages, double-spaced type. 2,800 pages. By the time I got to Princeton, the editor said, we're not going to publish your 2,800 pages because we never do. But we'll publish 800 pages, which will turn into 450 pages. And that's what ended up happening. The book that's coming out now, retitled because I've rearranged the book, but essentially has the most important parts of the previous book. It's called The Yoga of Love, Kṛṣṇa and the Rasa Līlā from the Bhagavata. And it will be out in a month. And that is you can find it on the internet now. And it will be coming out in a month or two. And it I commissioned this painting of Kṛṣṇa playing the flute, which is just a beautiful, beautiful painting done by Kim Waters, the one who did the illuminations from the Gita, the children's books. So she did a beautiful painting here for this book. So the scenes of the Rasa Līlā drama, what I realized what was so special about the Rasa Panchadhyayi, the 5 chapters, the 173 verses, were considered even by mundane academics to deliver some of the most exquisite poetry the world has ever seen. My professor at Harvard, the famous Daniel H.H. Ingalls, I went over to his home. He would have graduate students come to his home about once a month on Memorial Drive, right, that ran along the Charles River. And when he got to the 10th book, he even had to have a little bit of help reading it, because it's the language is so rich and so deep. He had to use some help, where he would read Sanskrit fluently without any problem. So what I realized is that the 5 chapters are the number of chapters that many Sanskrit dramatic plays have, and that I realized that it also broke down into these incredibly easily defined scenes, which I divided up according to poetic meter and the storyline, what was going on, whether it was narrative, whether it was the narrator speaking to the king, whatever. But look how it has this beautiful symmetry to it. That Harvard professor of mine wrote in another book, in an introduction to another book, he said that the 10th book, especially the Bhagavata's Rasa Līlā, he said, is the most enchanting poem ever written. Academics don't use absolute language like that. And look what he said. This is a man who read in 10 different languages poetry. He was a poetry expert. He said it's the most enchanting poem ever written. And I think, from Swamiji's lectures, you can get a sense of how rich it is, and the commentators and how they illuminate the depth of these various Bhagavata verses. Well, the Rasa Panchadhyayi is the highest. And I've located these 9 phases, and I'm not going to go into this too much because it's in the book, but awakening, anticipating, meeting, conflict, separation, loss, reuniting, rejoicing, and returning. So these are all phases of love demonstrated by the Vrajagopikas, who are the supreme bhaktas. And I do this in different ways. I even show how it's sort of cyclical. Yeah, the gopis awaken from their homes, they go out to the forest, they meet with Kṛṣṇa, there's a bit of conflict, as you'll see. Then they reunite with Kṛṣṇa, they dance with Kṛṣṇa, that's the rasa dance right there, and then they have to return to their homes, all to be awakened the next night. And this goes on eternally. The first 3 verses of the Rasa Līlā. Repeat after me. Sri Badarayanir Uvacha Bhagavan Apitaratri Sharadot Pullamallika Viksharantum Manas Chakre Yogamayam Upashritaha. I got this shot of Kṛṣṇa coming out into the forest at the start of the, I had a quick little visit to the spiritual world, and with my phone, I took this shot. You may laugh at me. You have no idea who I am. Okay? Now, one thing I need to tell you is that this first verse, there's nothing special about this first verse in the sense that it's shloka. It's the typical Anushtubh meter, 8 syllables per quarter line. This is the general Puranic verse that's all over the place. It's simple. There's nothing complicated about Anushtubh verses. I had to render this verse 49 times before I accepted it to be finally published. Let me tell you why. First of all, here, the illustrious son of Vyasa spoke. Even the beloved Lord, seeing those nights in autumn filled with blooming jasmine flowers, turned his mind toward love's delights, fully taking refuge in Yogamaya's elusive powers. simple enough. You might be thinking, in fact, I can hear many of you thinking, what is Garuda saying? He says 49 times. That is ridiculous. This is simple enough. I mean, this should have been easy for him. I mean, he's a Sanskrit scholar, textual, critical scholar, whatever. But what's happened here is that, so here somehow the verse showed up when I took this shot. Okay. You don't know, magical things. Those of you who've been to Vrindavan, magical things happen. Okay, let's go on to we're going to get back to that that first verse, because it is so deep. It is. One time I was reading it I teach students in two different places. One in a university in Virginia, those are my undergrads, and I teach graduate students in Berkeley, at Graduate Theological Union. That's part of University of California, Berkeley. So one time I was teaching this to a class, and a student came up to me and said, only had one thing to say to me: I thought Shakespeare was deep. Wow. Okay, so we'll get back to that. But listen to this. The poetry is beautiful. Tato da raja kakubak rairmukam prachya velimpan aranena shantamai sacharshaninam utagachacho marjan priya priyaya ivadirga darshana. I mean, the poetry is just exquisite. It's flowing. It's beautiful, and it's rich in metaphor. It's rich in metaphor, and that has to be brought out. And it's like any real art. It has to be viewed or heard over and over and over, so you could go deeper and deeper and deeper into it. Then the moon, king among stars, arose, spreading soothing reddish rays over the face of the eastern horizon, dispelling the sorrow from those who looked on, as a lover caresses his beloved's blushed face, consoling her after long separation. So as a lover touches the face of his beloved, and as she blushes, so the moon touches the horizon and is blushed with reddish rays. That's the metaphor there. Seeing lotus flowers bloom in the perfect circle of the moon, beaming like the face of Rama, the goddess, reddish as fresh kumkuma, seeing the forest colored by the moon's gentle rays, he began to make sweet music, melting the hearts of fair maidens with beautiful eyes. Of course, referring to the Vrajagopikas. Isn't that the sweetest depiction of Kṛṣṇa playing the flute? This is where Kṛṣṇa is moved to play the flute when viewing and smelling the beautiful scent of jasmine. You can see the jasmine all over the trees. And the moon is behind Kṛṣṇa's lotus face and doubles up as both the effulgence and the moon. So the purpose of this divine drama is found in a bija first verse. This is very common in Sanskrit kavya literature, that the first verse is the bija, the seed, which means that everything essential is there to tell you what's in the rest of the drama. As an oak tree is contained in an acorn. So of course, it obviously speaks how God is passionately loving souls, being himself conquered by love. So the four principles of the sacred drama should be in the first verse, right? The beloved Lord, the hero who takes full refuge in love. Paradisal scenery is certainly there. The cowherd Did we read about the cowherd maidens in the first verse? We'll go back to that. The uniting power of love is Yogamaya, the divine feminine power of yoga. What is going on here? Where are the cowherd maidens? The paradisal scenery is there. Kṛṣṇa is there. Yogamaya is there. where are the Vrajagopikas? Their voice is the most prominent in the 173 verses of the Rāsa Panchadhyayi. So where are they? So I'm going crazy. They have to be in the first verse. And I even showed it to my wife. She said, Garuda, they're not there. I said, no, they are there. You just can't see them, and I can't see them, but they're there. It has to be there. This is the Bija verse. Anyway, I must have seemed like a maniac for a good month or so, pacing around the house, like looking for the gopis. I was a crazy man. I was like, I said, I know they're there. You just can't see them. Okay, just find them in the verse. I'm repeating the verse dozens of times, translating it dozens of times. I cannot find the gopis. Well, one night, I find myself dreaming in Sanskrit at times, okay? And sometimes translating in my dreams. You know, well, one night I was dreaming about this first verse. And in the middle of the night, at 1:30 in the morning, I fling the blanket off of me. Now, you don't know me that well, but when I get up in the morning, I'm more like, the alarm goes off, you know, and it takes me I'm in a grog state for at least an hour. And some of my best japa is done in my grog state, honestly. But that's beside the point. I pop out of bed so fast. I go running to the next room, my study. I go to a book that I never go to. And I turn right to a page that I need to. It's about the Vedic goddesses of the night. Ratri. Bhagavan api ta ratri. You know, there are many words in Sanskrit for nights, and they don't have to be in the feminine gender. Ratri is in the feminine gender. There's a Vedic goddess of the night known as Ratri. So, in a metaphor, poetry is what makes the words in poetry poetry? Metaphor. What is metaphor? Metaphor are profound juxtapositions that illuminate aspects of reality, either of this world, if you're writing worldly poetry, or of the divine world, if you're writing transcendental poetry. So, all metaphors have a vehicle and a tenor, and they have grounds. They have a grounds. So, if you say Garuda Das is a pig, that conjures up, images of Garuda like gorging himself on prasadam or something. You know, being overindulgent, eating too much or whatever, or being fat, right? Because pigs have those qualities, right? So obviously Garuda Das is not a pig. I'm not of that species. I was in the previous life, but not this life. So give me a break, okay? So the vehicle is pig, which takes you to Garuda, which gives you an idea that Garuda is just an overindulgent fat guy. Okay, so that's the tenor, okay? So the autumn nights blooming jasmine flowers in the dark nights, it takes you to the tenor of the Vedic goddesses. The night are like Vedic goddesses. Why? Because the darkened trees are like young ladies in India who have black hair and wear the jasmine in their hair. Any young ladies here with jasmine in their hair? Didn't I hire someone to do that for me? Okay, maybe not. Okay, usually I do. Okay, but anyway, but it's a complex metaphor because the Vedic goddesses becomes the vehicle for what? The cowherd maidens, whose behavior is like that of Jasmine. So in other words, Jasmine, first of all, Jasmine, during the autumn, Jasmine does not bloom in autumn. It's not supposed to bloom in autumn. It blooms in the spring and it blooms in the summer. So Jasmine's not supposed to bloom in autumn any more than the gopis are supposed to bloom from their homes. So that's another aspect of the metaphor. Jasmine's doing something that it's not supposed to do, just as the gopis are doing something they're not supposed to do. Okay? So the Vedic goddesses, Ratri, represent the vehicle for the tenor, the cowherd maidens. And that's where the cowherd maidens are in the first verse. Then the cowherd maidens of the Vrajagopikas' behavior is like that of Jasmine, which then precipitates the tenor of Autumn Nights, and that brings you right back to Autumn Nights, and you keep going down this sort of complex levels, these complex levels of metaphor. Anyway, it's a little tricky to describe quickly, but that's what's happening. So that's why the cowherd maidens are in the first verse as heroines conveyed by complex metaphor. And that was revealed to me in a dream. Otherwise, I'd still be crazy to this day. Okay, how are we doing time-wise here? Okay. So far, any comments or questions? Anything, because I've been presenting quite a bit. Any sort of reactions? Let's go to someone else. You look a little too eager to, okay, he's the only one raising his hand, so. And please say your names when you ask anything or say
I'm Subal Das.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Well, I'm not done yet, so,
Yeah, so
you don't know.
quickly. Well, one
You don't know how wonderful. Yeah.
well, our spiritual master told us that we're going to get a treat by hearing you, and indeed.
Who may I ask who your spiritual master is?
Swamiji.
Oh, okay. Well, he okay, never mind.
So,
He invited me here. Obviously, I have to be. Yeah.
you mentioned, you quoted Srila Prabhupada,
Yes.
what he mentioned about the Rāsa Līlā.
Right.
And it appears that Srila Prabhupada, it appears that he's saying that most of us, or at least us followers of Srila Prabhupada, or even members of the Gaudiya Vaishnava a tradition, we're going to be entering into the Rāsa Līlā, I'm assuming as Gopi, Braja Gopis. Is that something that is correct? And then I'm going to add this to Garuda Prabhu. I was in the generation that received instructions to be very cautious about reading about the Rāsa Līlā. And one thing is, to be guard about taking sahaja type of attitude. So, but this type of what we're looking forward to be is quite puzzling and quite, in one sense, wonderful. Can you?
Yeah. If I'm understanding what you're sort of pointing to, let's not take for granted many of Prabhupada's cautionary statements about reading the Vraja Leelas, and particularly those Leelas involving Krishna's interactions with the gopis. For sure. He wanted to make sure that we were not reading these things in a mundane fashion, in a mundane way. And when you read Krishna book, and the chapters focused on the Rāsa Panchadhyayi, Prabhupada weaves that caution, those cautionary words throughout the whole text. So he did want us to be very, very respectful and careful. And the fact is, outsiders of the Chaitanya Vaishnava tradition who find out that we worship, divinity, dancing with the Vrajagopikas, they interpret it in mundane ways. But then again, we've got the etic emic tension, the outsider-insider tension of traditions. I mean, someone who's not a Christian looks at Jesus on a cross and says, this is just the goriest, ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's Roman capital punishment. I mean, essentially, if Jesus were killed today, he made maybe with lethal injection. I have a little syringe hanging from my neck, instead of a cross. I mean, but to a Christian, this is God's sacrificial love. That's what it means to them on the inside. On the outside, it's Roman capital punishment. So, Christians obviously would be concerned that would be misinterpreted, just as we would be concerned that Radha Kṛṣṇa would be misinterpreted. I mean, at the center of all of our temples practically is Radha and Kṛṣṇa. I remember that when I was in graduate school, the Harvard Crimson newspaper wanted me to take them to the temple and do an interview. So I introduced them to Radha Gopiballabha. That's right. That's the name of the deity, right? Radha Gopiballabha. And they were asking, who is, we understand Krishna's God, but who is this? I said, this is the supreme divine feminine, his consort. There's always relationality in love. You can't have love without a relation. So that's what we worship. We worship divine love, supreme love. We worship a divinity who is supremely beautiful, who is supremely playful, who is supremely joyful. And that's what the Ras Mandala is all about. That's what the Ras Līlā is about. There's a place for, Christ on the cross for Christians, and we can respect that. It's funny, I was giving a lecture in New York, Brooklyn Temple, and it was a Sunday feast. And I asked if there were any questions, and a young lady way in the back said, I'm really desiring to be a Krishna Bhakta, but my parents are, very devoted Christians, and they don't want me to be a Krishna Bhakta. What advice do you have to give to them? I said, well, why don't you ask them what they love so much about Jesus and why they want to share that with you? Why don't you ask them, what do they love so much about Jesus? Get them talking about divine love. And perhaps when they do, they'll appreciate something about your vision of divine love. The temple president then raised his hand saying, Garuda, I'm really surprised you answered that way. I said, well, fine. How would you answer? He said, well, you should tell your parents that God the Father is Krishna and you're worshiping Krishna, but you don't know it. I told the young lady, I said, don't listen to him. He is the temple president, but don't listen to him. Because no one likes to be told who they love. You can't do that. You may know that Krishna is God the Father, but we don't generally say we worship Krishna, God the Father. We don't even think of Krishna as a father, although he does present himself as that in the Gita, the father of the universe, the seed-giving father, and so on, chapter 14. But we don't relate to Krishna that way. We relate to Krishna as he is loving his supreme Radha. And the love that comes from that divine relationship, which goes all over the universe. That's what we worship. We ultimately don't even worship Krishna, just Krishna. We don't worship even just Krishna and Radha. We worship the love that subsumes both of them. We're a tradition that worships divine love. The Johannine expression, God is love, we can agree with that. But we would take it a step further. Love is God. And I don't think anyone else can say that but us. So this is what we're about. I didn't even remember what your question was. But anyway, But anyway, yes, but we should be cautious. We should be. Prabhupada was over and over cautious about prematurely reading or speaking about the divine Leelas in Vraja Leela. But today, and Swamiji's program here is to speak about the Vraja Leelas. To do so in a very sober and respectful way is the way to do it. To talk about it intimately, you do that with only very few Vaishnavas at a time. Jai Shri Shri Radha Damodar.
Aside from, you responded very thoroughly to one feature of what he said, but you didn't touch on the other feature. The other feature is, would your advice to all of us be that one day we'll be in Krishna's Rasa dance?
That's a complex issue, because we understand that ultimately we serve the Vrajagopikas in the Rasa dance, and in that way vicariously dance as manjaris, not manjaris, by the way. Not manjaris, no such thing. Manjaris. I even lecture in yoga communities where they will call a female practitioner of yoga is what? Not yogini. If it rhymes with fettuccine, capellini, it is an Italian preparation. It's yogini. Yogini. That's right. But yes, but there's no simple answer to the point you're raising from his point, which is how do we dance? Well, I think that in one sense, everything in Raj Loka, everything is dancing with Krishna's love. One way or another, it's dancing. Rasa itself is a dance between hearts. So you can even understand it that way. What to speak of joining the dance, as Prabhupada literally says, join the dance. So my understanding, though, on a technical level, is that we're Gopi Bhartur para Kamalayur dāsa adu dāsa, right? So we are manjaris serving the Vrajagopikas who are dancing in the Ras Mandala. That's right. But they're all supporting this. Now, another reason why the Ras Līlā is considered the Līlā of all Līlas, as Krishnadas Kaviraj says, Līlā Sara, the essence of all Līlas. So, the essence of all Līlas. I like that because then we can understand the Vrajagopas are there, the Vatsalya Rasa is there with Krishna's parents. But the essence of all Līlas is the Ras Līlā, because the Ras Līlā is the only Līlā that acknowledges and recognizes within its Līlā all the other Līlas. They're all mentioned by the Vrajagopikas. In the Gopi Gita, for example, as the gopis are singing verses of longing in separation for Krishna, they're recognizing all of the different Līlas there. And they're even imitating. In the second chapter, the gopis are imitating Krishna in different Līlas, the Govardhan Līlā and Kaliya Līlā and so on. So it's the Līlā of all Līlas, and it's the essence of all Līlas. So Krishna's playing with the Vrajagopas is still it's all there, in a sense, framing the ultimate Līlā, as the Ras Līlā frames all other Līlas. Very rich stuff. Very rich stuff. Okay, shall we go on? Oh, someone else have a question? Yes. He looks safe. You can give him. Your name first.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. My name is Ramakada Das.
Very good.
Very beautiful class, Prabhuji. My question, uh, like you mentioned while answering his question, love is God. The statement looks interesting, but it is a bit because love is the relationship between two individuals. So, because when we say love is God, it tends to indicate that neither of the two are God, but the relationship is God. So, uh, but Krishna is God, Radharani is God. Yes, sir. So, can you please elaborate or clarify how we should understand God is love and love is God? Both the statements look.
Yes.
Yeah, can you
Okay.
clarify?
So, any of you who've been twice initiated and have received Gayatri Mantra, the Kama Gayatri, the seventh line, has the word for love as ananga. It means formless. Love is the formlessness, it's the formless energy between the two forms, Radha and Krishna. We worship their love so much. We are totally enthralled by how love subsumes them, that Krishna himself wants to understand that. And the only way he can do that is by manifesting as Chaitanya. So Chaitanya is the love, the exchange of love, the embodiment of the love that's shared between Radha and Krishna. So we are a tradition that worships love itself, and that's Chaitanya. Isn't that amazing? I mean, I'm amazed. I don't know about you, but that's our tradition. That's Krishna. Krishna is so amazed by the love that he has to manifest as Chaitanya to understand the nature of that love. Externally, he comes and shows us how to be bhaktas. But if I were you, I would not imitate Chaitanya. He was just all over the place. He had to have people taking care of him. He couldn't contain all the love that he had. That's Mahabhava. He couldn't, and that's ultimately what every bhakta experiences at the end of his or her life. A love that's so uncontainable, it's like a kid growing out of a shoe. Can't wear that shoe anymore. This body can no longer contain all the affection I have for bhaktas and the Bhagavad. So we are a tradition that worships divine love. And I would say like no other tradition. I mean, that's a bold thing to say, but we're among friends here. So God is love. See, in the book of John, the Gospel of John, John says, God is love. Yes, we totally embrace that idea. God sacrificed his only begotten Son, Jesus, for our sake. That's an act of divine love. This is what is so, this is part of the Christian Rāsa. Our Rāsa is represented by the principal deities of Vrindavan, Radha Madan Mohan, Radha Govinda, and Radha Gopinath, or Radha Gopijana Vallabha. A supremely beautiful, supremely playful, and supremely joyful deity. That's what we worship. And we're to join that loving, joyful realm, the beautiful realm. So that's love. And Radha and Krishna are totally subsumed by it. This is why the first verse says, Yogamayam upashritaha. It's the only place in the whole Bhagavatam where Yogamaya is mentioned, where Krishna takes full refuge in Yogamaya so he can forget himself and just be loving with the Vraja Gopikas. And that's because love, and Yogamaya arranges this, the energy of love just takes over them. That is how love is God. Thank you for your comment, yeah. No one else, right? Then we'll move to the Song of the Flute. We are all about being called to love. The love call of the divine. Kṛṣṇa is calling us. Have you ever wondered when you see Kṛṣṇa with his beloved Radha, why he's playing his flute? He plays his flute to get all the gopis out to the forest and to find his beloved Radha. So why is he still holding the flute? He's calling us. Note how Radha and Kṛṣṇa, they are exhibiting the outward gaze of divinity. I'm writing about this currently, about the outward gaze of divinity, and you'll see this in my slides, and the inward gaze of divinity. The outward gaze of divinity is Radha Kṛṣṇa while Kṛṣṇa is playing the flute. Kṛṣṇa has no need to play the flute when he's with his beloved Radha. But they are both calling us to their hearts. That's what we're worshiping here. That's what we're doing here. Wait a minute. I can hear Kṛṣṇa calling me right now. Can you hear it? Okay, sorry, I'm not good at whistling. But I am good at doing this Bharatanatyam thing. It's the only Bharatanatyam dancing I know. I learned it from a Bharatanatyam dancer. Okay. Song of the Flute. This is a whole chapter, several chapters earlier, before the Rasa Panchadhyayi is even presented. I believe it's chapter 21. Thus the forest was filled with clear autumn waters and gentle breezes carrying the sweet scent of lotus flowers. Entering that scene together with cows and cowherd friends, Achyuta appeared. Among groves of flowering trees and lakes, rivers, and hills, resounding with flocks of birds and swarming maddened bees, Madhupati arrived, accompanied by Balaram and the cowherd boys. While tending the cows, he began to play his flute. Those women of Vraja were aroused by passion after hearing the song of his flute. Some of them, in his absence, were moved to describe the qualities of Kṛṣṇa to their intimate friends. As they began to describe him, they remembered the playful activities of Kṛṣṇa. Their minds again became disturbed by the force of passion, and they could no longer speak. Okay, I need to tell you about what's happening here. The Vraja Gopikas are together during the day. Remember, they meet with Kṛṣṇa at night. So during the day, Kṛṣṇa's meeting with his boyfriends, his cowherd friends. In the morning, his parents take care of him. In the afternoon, he's out playing with his cowherd friends. But while he's playing out there, he plays the flute. Okay, the flute plays. Now, what happens is the Vraja Gopikas are attending to their domestic duties. And when they speak about Kṛṣṇa, they get so intense and so overwhelmed by affection that they freeze. They just freeze. And then they hear in the distance Kṛṣṇa's flute. And then they arouse again. And then that gets them talking about Kṛṣṇa again. And it gets more and more intense. And then they freeze. And then they hear Kṛṣṇa's flute. And they're caught in this cycle all day long. This is the special samadhi of the Vraja Gopikas. Adorned with a crown of peacock feathers and blue karnikar flowers, ornamenting his ears, he, most excellent of dancers, wearing the Vaijayanti garland and yellow garments brilliant as gold, filled the holes of his flute with the nectar of his lips while his praises were being sung by cowherd friends. He then entered the Vrindavan forest, made beautiful by his footprints. This is also exquisite poetry in Sanskrit. I mean, it's just, a translator goes into just just miserable states of conditioning trying to deal with how do I bring the beauty of the original into English. So you do the best you can by, sometimes I can spend 2 weeks on one verse. I mean, really, now a lot of academic translators, they just translate it in 5 minutes. They just slop it off, but that's not doing justice. Thus, hearing, O king, the sound of the flute that captivates the hearts of all beings, the young women of Vraja began describing that alluring sound yet again, embracing him within their minds. The beautiful gopis spoke. O friends, for those who have eyes, we have no greater reward than this. Entering the forest with their companions and herding the cowherd boys before them, the 2 sons of the ruler of Vraja, whose faces are adorned by the flutes they play, cast loving glances all around them. It is this vision that is constantly imbibed. Dressed in a splendid array of garments, decorated with tender mango leaves, peacock feathers, and bunches of flowers, and wearing garlands of lotuses and lilies, the 2 of them are exceedingly beautiful, sometimes singing among their cowherd friends and appearing like the most excellent of dancers on a stage. O gopis, what auspicious acts must have been performed by this flute? For it enjoys the nectar flowing from the lips of Damodar. There we have, right there. Leaving only a taste for us cowherd girls, to whom this nectar truly belongs. The rivers themselves, mothers of the bamboo from which the flute is made, feel jubilant with blooming lotuses. And the forefathers of the flute, the bamboo trees, shed tears of joy with their flowing sap. So they consider the sap, the tears. So this goes on, and maybe just a couple more. O friend, Vrindavan enhances the beauty of the earth with treasure obtained from the lotus feet of the son of Devaki. Upon hearing the flute of Govinda, peacocks dance in rapture. Observing their dancing from hilltops, all other creatures become stunned. Yes, it's described that all moving beings become still when the flute is heard, and all still beings start moving. So even rocks start melting. And birds who normally fly all over the place, they just sitting there stunned. Krishna's flute. What is more prominent in the worship of Radha and Krishna than Krishna's flute? The love call of the divine is one of the most important features of our theology. How Krishna is endlessly calling us. Blessed surely, in spite of their ignorance, are these female deer who have taken birth as animals. Upon hearing the exquisitely dressed son of Nanda sound his divine flute, they offer him worship through affectionate glances along with their black deer mates. So the Vrajagopikas are a little jealous of the deer who seem to be worshiping Krishna just beautifully. Okay, so I'm going to take the let's go to the love call of the divine. Yes. Oh yes, the microphone is coming, Swamiji.
In the translation, I saw flutes, and then I saw flute.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
Balaram is playing a flute also?
Apparently. Not a whole lot, not like Krishna does.
Okay. But,
Yeah,
and the same purpose.
it's implied, because why would there be more than one flute? But it is plural.
Now, a second is, as you portrayed it, like the scene of what's happening, this is the daytime scene.
Right.
And the daytime scene, as I understood it, is cyclical.
That's right.
And the cyclical, he's setting the scene for what's going to happen that evening. We're not evening yet, we're still daytime.
That's right.
And he's moving their hearts, their minds, and everything and everything.
They're in this endless cycle. They're stuck.
And the birds and the rocks and the deer and, just while he's off with the gopas, this is going on in preparation for the evening.
Yes. Well, they all go together, the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. And, it's a cycle, right, as we know.
Yeah.
So they support one another in Krishna's delight in the three upper rasas, right? Sakya rasa, Vatsalya, and we call it Madhurya, we can, but Sringara is more precisely the word for the fifth rasa. Yeah, so they beautifully sort of build up to the evening Ras Līlā.
Well, from what the picture of the daytime cyclical, etc.
Govinda.
There's a portrayal that Krishna is playing upon his flute with Radha by his side. So who's he calling? Because she's by his side. So he's calling us. That was a message. But daytime, she's not by his side, but he's with the counterpoint.
Right.
So it's in addition to calling us, it's preparing for the evening activities.
Right. And even in the evening, Radha is not so explicitly there. Okay. You'll have to wait. You'll have to wait. Yeah. I'm sorry, Swamiji. There's just some things you have to wait for. And this is one of them because I'm going to be showing what happens in the whole Līlā and how the ultimate display of the Ras Mandala, when I showed you the commissioned painting, and you'll see another updated commissioned painting by Kim Waters, Radha is in the middle with Krishna. But that is not described in the Bhagavata. There's no gopi in the middle with Krishna. It's the one deviation I make in the depictions because it's unthinkable for a Chaitanya Vaishnava, for Radha, not to be in the middle. Because the Vrajagopikas, now I'm jumping ahead because you're mind controlling me right now. Happily. No, that yeah, I know nothing can control this mind. I understand that. Yeah. That was a good comeback. But the Vrajagopikas are understood in the Vaishnava tradition, in our Chaitanya Vaishnava tradition, as embodiments of different emotions of Radha. So even those immediate Gopikas, those Vrajagopikas, are themselves Radha, just in various embodiments of her emotions. So just as Krishna, we say expands, that's tricky for outsiders. When we say that, if I say to someone, I've expanded myself, they don't think that I've duplicated myself multiple times. They think I just got blown up like a balloon. But we, see, when Prabhupada says expands, we know exactly what he means. But that's not for outsiders. So I described that Krishna duplicates himself multiple times. It's bulky, but it's accurate. And they'll never think that Krishna's blowing himself up. Okay. So, but we're still trying to hear the love call. Do you hear the love call, or if you? Okay, go on.
The love call.
Oh.
Because from the perspective of, I'm a musician, and I always hear about this fifth note
Yeah.
in that chapter. Do you know which one is the fifth note? It's
Sarigamapada. Yeah.
Yeah, the soul. Or,
Yeah, that's right.
But that's what's so special about that note that,
This is funny. Someone just recently asked me about this. In Western musicology, it's called the perfect fifth. Even in the West, it's the perfect fifth. And even a tambura is tuned to that fifth, although if you turn it upside down, it's the fourth and the fifth. Anyway, the fourth and the fifth are related. Anyway, but why the fifth? I'd have to look into that. I want to look into it because even in the West, it's known as the perfect fifth. Something about the fifth. Yeah. And I think Krishna's love call contains the fifth note. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. We have a few minutes left to go. Okay, there's Kṛṣṇa playing his flute, calling us. Of course, at the beginning of the Rāsa Panchadhyayi, he's not with any gopis yet. So this is where Kṛṣṇa is calling the Vrajagopikas. With Radha Damodar, Kṛṣṇa has already had the gopis come and receive, and then Radha, his special gopi, is with him. But this is not happening yet here in this picture. Upon hearing that sweet music, this is the fourth verse, their passion for him swelling, the young women of Vraja whose minds were captured by Kṛṣṇa, unaware of one another, ran off to the place where their beloved was waiting, with their earrings swinging wildly. And in the Sanskrit, Javalo Lakundala, Javalo Lakundala. It's almost onomatopoeic. Some left abruptly while milking the cows. Due to excitement, the milking had ceased. Some left the milk as it boiled over. Have you ever smelled milk burning? They didn't care. Others departed cakes on the hearth, leaving cakes on the hearth. Some suddenly stopped dressing themselves. Others no longer fed children their milk. Oh, Some left their husbands. This is the worst one. I'm not speaking personally or anything. Some left their husbands who had not yet been served. Sin of all sins. Others, while eating, abandoned their meals. Some were massaging their bodies with oils or cleansing themselves, others applying ointment to their eyes, their garments and ornaments in utter disarray. They hastened to be with Kṛṣṇa. So this is why I thanked Shyamasaki earlier in my talk for saving a parking space for me, for which I was looking endlessly for about 10 or 15 minutes last night. There were other parking spaces available, but I felt like I was special, I have a parking space. Now, why couldn't I think of Kṛṣṇa in that way and be looking for Kṛṣṇa? So this was Shyamasaki's lesson for me. I did find the space today, though, so I'm very happy about that. Their husbands, fathers, brothers, all relatives endeavored to detain them. Since their hearts had been stolen by Govinda, they who were entranced did not turn back. Well, once they were gone, they were gone. That was it, right? I just happened to be there. I took this with my phone. There is this, I could barely get it without blurring. I mean, she was running so fast. Now, this is important. Well, it's all important, but I'd like to point out something here. Jai Shri Shri Radha. Some gopis, unable to leave, had gone inside their homes. With eyes closed, fully absorbed in love, they meditated upon Kṛṣṇa. So these are the gopis that couldn't leave for whatever reason. The intense burning of unbearable separation from their dearest beloved disrupted all inauspiciousness. Due to the joy of embracing achyuta, attained through meditation, even their worldly happiness was lost. And I just happened to sneak into one of the homes, and there she was, meditating. Okay, so no matter how you cut it, the gopis ran from their homes, either internally or externally. And this is our great lesson. The great example of the Vraja Gopikas. We're either running externally to Kṛṣṇa or we're running internally, or both. It says that they relinquished a body of physical elements. So at one level, you could interpret this as a kind of death narrative. They gave up bodies of physical elements. Well, generally that's called death. Have you noticed? If my wife calls up Swamiji and says, my husband gave up his body of physical elements, you'll assume that I died, right? I don't know why you're laughing. It's a sad moment, Swamiji. I will not see my friend Garuda Das until I go back to the spiritual world to be with him, which is optimistic on my end. Okay, that's fine. In any case, so it can be interpreted as a death narrative. They, in effect, died to this world. And when I wrote in a chapter of a book about Tamal Krishna Goswami, he was supposed to write this chapter. This is ironic. Before he passed away, he was supposed to write the last chapter of an academic book called Dying the Good Death. Go figure that. He was working on that article while he was in Mayapur, and he had passed away after that. And I got the books that he was carrying when he passed away. And I finished this chapter that he was to write. And I started by saying there's a bit of irony involved here in my writing this, because Goswami was to write this chapter, and he, in effect, was experiencing the very thing he was to write about. I mean, I believe in field work, but not that, not that much. But I did this chapter in honor of him and spoke about dying the good death. And it's interesting when you hear about the Vraja Gopikas and how they left. You could say that they were being irresponsible on a worldly level. They left with, this undone and that undone. Well, guess what? When death comes, there are a lot of things that are left undone. Don't think you can make your bed before, you kick the bucket. Probably not going to happen. Okay? It's abrupt. It's sudden. Death doesn't come as part of a schedule. So the Vraja Gopikas left this world to be with Kṛṣṇa as a model for us. As Swamiji said earlier, Līlās are there to teach us. So the Vraja Gopikas, on the one hand, are there to perpetuate eternally their own Līlā and be self-nourishing as a Līlā. But it's also there to teach us who have not entered the Līlā how to enter the Līlā. So their abrupt departure is very much what death is like. And what I say in this article that I wrote, this chapter I wrote for Tamal Kṛṣṇa, I quote Prabhupada in the end saying, it does not matter, Prabhupada says, it does not matter how or when or why or where a bhakta leaves this world. It does not matter. Because he or she has already left this world. It's just a matter of just walking through a door. Seeing they had arrived nearby, the beloved Lord then approached the young women of Vraja. He, most eloquent of all speakers, this is very esoteric, I'm not going to explain it, began to converse with them, bewildering them with playful words. Okay, now wait till you see this. Welcome, most fortunate ladies. What can I do to please you? Is all going well in Vraja? Please explain the purpose of your arrival. The nerve of him. The nerve of him. Remember, Kṛṣṇa plays the flute because he's so moved by the beauty of the scene. He's overwhelmed by the beauty of that evening, that autumn night filled with blooming jasmine flowers. And he can do nothing but think about the Vrajagopikas as he sees the jasmine decorating the darkened trees like their hair carrying of jasmine. He's so overwhelmed and desiring to be with the Vrajagopikas, he plays his flute. And now he's asking, what's up? Then he says, listen to this. Night has a frightening appearance. Inhabiting this place are fearsome creatures. Please return to Vraja. Women should not remain here. Oh, ones with beautiful waists. Well, I'm not going to teach you Sanskrit, but Sanskrit has a way, if one knows how to write it, has a way of saying the negative and the positive linguistically at the same time. In English, this is not possible. The only way it's possible is by uttering something linguistically, but giving some outward behavior, behaving in such a way or indicating something opposite. So, for example, I'm going to say two positives right now in English, and when I'm really intending two negatives. Okay, ready? Yeah, right. Did you get it? Yeah, no. No, wrong is what I'm really saying. But the tone, yeah, right. But you can't do it in English linguistically, but you can in Sanskrit. So what is Kṛṣṇa saying here? Night is without a frightening appearance. Inhabiting this place are creatures. That are not fearsome. Please do not return to Vraja. Women should remain here. Oh, ones with beautiful waists. He's saying this at the exact same time as he says the first one. But the gopis are very smart. They undo this in their responses. Then he goes on to say, your mother's fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands cannot find you. They are searching for you. Do not create anxiety for your families. Then, at the same time, he is saying, you ready for this? Your mother's fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands cannot find you. So that's good. They cannot find you. They're not looking for you. They're not missing you. Even though they are searching for you, you must not be anxious for your families. So no problem. Hang out with me. Isn't that amazing? He says both at the same time. That's almost not conceivable for us in unless you know how to do this. Then he says something very beautiful and poetic. You have seen the forest filled with flowers, glowing with the rays of the full moon, made beautiful by leaves of trees, playfully shimmering from the gentle breeze off the river Yamuna. So now, of course, he's just getting absorbed in the Vraja beauty. And then he goes back to this. Please go to the village without delay. O chaste ladies, attend your husbands. Your calves and children are crying for you. You must go and feed and nurse them. What is he saying at the same time? Here we go. Here we go. Please do not go back right away to attend your husbands, O chaste ladies. Your calves and children are crying for others, not for you. You need not feed or nurse them. This is a hell of a way to be greeted. Or perhaps your hearts are bound out of deep affection for me. Since all living beings are dear to me, you also must have come to be near me. You know, if other beings are close to me, you ladies must also be close. For every woman, the highest dharma is to serve her husband without falsity. I read this to my wife daily. I don't mean to get into personal issues here. I really do. Be agreeable toward his family members and nourish the children. For the dharma of all other women is to serve false husbands. I don't read this one. Be agreeable toward their family members and nourish the children. So you can see how Kṛṣṇa is responding to them. Even if unpleasant, unfortunate, old, decrepit, sickly, or poor, if not morally fallen, the husband should not be deserted by women desiring a better position in the world. So this is sort of, your traditional verbiage. Okay, so this finally, and we'll end here. For this does not lead to heaven nor to good reputation. Instead, it brings undesirable, painful, fearful results. Certainly, adultery is condemned everywhere by women from good families. But, he says, women from good families know adultery is found everywhere, anyway, with their own husbands, and it should be condemned. In other words, I'm your only real husband. Your husbands are not real. They're not your husbands. I am your real husband. It's what Kṛṣṇa's really saying. And then finally, by hearing about me, seeing me, meditating on me, and praising me, you feel love for me, not by being in my presence. Therefore, you should return to your homes. So that's the way it's left. So we'll stop there as a kind of cliffhanger, and we'll resume later this afternoon. Thank you so much. Hare Kṛṣṇa.